Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. The Goo Goo Dolls rock Merriweather Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland this Friday night. I spoke with bass player Robbie Takak about the band's biggest hits, including Name, Iris, Slide, Black Balloon, and Broadway. Robbie Takak, hey, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
It's great to be here with you.
Obviously the bassist and one of the vocalists of Goo Goo Dolls coming to Merriweather Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland on August 4th. So everybody get your tickets now. All right, so what can we expect from the show? Is it, do you guys always sprinkle in the greatest hits, or is it mostly stuff from Chaos and Bloom, the new album from last year, or a little of both?
Well, there's, there's about 12, 13 songs that we would probably get murdered if we didn't play before we left. It would be out back with pitchforks. No, I mean, we do our best. Music's a powerful thing, man. It's like your sense of smell or your sense of touch. Like it makes things react, in your mind. And a lot of these songs that we've been playing for people for all these years take up a really special part of people's psyche. So we try to play those songs, you'd think it would get easier and easier when you get 14 records out to put a set list together. It gets harder. Every record we put out, because all of a sudden there's more songs and you still have to fit them in the same amount of time. So, first world problems, but it is a problem. It's
a good problem to have, but yeah, the more albums you add, you're like, well, how the heck am I going to choose? What do I cut? And like you're saying, there's so many, you can't cut the super beloved ones because they're soundtracks of all of our lives. So yeah, well, we can get into some of those in a second, but real quick, before any of that, I always like to set the stage of, where you grew up. I know you were born in Buffalo in the 60s. Were you, I guess so, then you would have been like in your late 20s, early 30s with those Jim Kelly, Thurman Thomas, Super Bowl 4 losses in a row for the Bills? I hate to bring it up, but you got
PTSD from that stuff, man.
Well, we're a Washington fan, that Super Bowl was one of our better teams. But hey, that's even 30 years ago now. So we have trauma now too after Dan Snyder. But anyway, were you all Bills fans?
Yeah, man, I think if you're in Buffalo and you're not a Bills fan, there's a good chance they might send folks over to burn your house down. So, we've always participated.
Yeah, well, sorry to bring up the 4 straight Super Bowl losses, but Josh Allen now, I think you're on the right track now. You guys got us.
Yeah. They seem to want to, they seem to want to crown him now. So let's hopefully he'll do the right things for all the folks back home. They awesome. Are really putting a lot of faith in him.
Absolutely. Well, we're not here to talk football. Let's get back to the music. How did you? So I bring that up because I guess all of you, frontman Johnny Resnick, drummer George Tatuska, you're all from Buffalo. So how did you all meet actually and form there in Buffalo?
John and I, he was in a band with my cousin when we were kids in like the early 80s. And, I had filled in with their band a few times, and we just felt a kinship and moved into a house and started driving around the country in a van in 86, released our first record in 87, and sold 9,000 copies and thought we were killing it. Recorded another one, sold 30,000 copies, thought we were killing it more. And there's just been a lot of little victories until in 95, we had Name, and everything kind of changed at that point.
Yeah, and when you throw out 1986 as the founding of the band, it's true. Like a lot of people might remember you as, starting in like the early 90s or something, but no, you guys go all the way back to the 80s. I think there was even like 3 or 4 albums before A Boy Named Goo, and you were like the lead singer on most all of that stuff too. So go back and invite us to check back the earlier stuff, right?
Yeah. That's a bunch of we grew out of the kind of post-punk New York City kind of scene. We would play with bands like Murphy's Law and DRI and Motorhead and a band, Gangrene, punk rock bands like that back in the time. And I think that's what sort of separates this group a little bit from a lot of the bands that were kind of doing, similar things to what we were doing back in the 90s, was that, we were born of a band that drove around in a van for a really long time, playing really dirty clubs,
Those
playing,
glory, those glory days of the 80s. A lot of bands don't
yeah,
have that in their track record. So when it comes time
yeah,
for those whatever Rock Hall, and I'm sure you don't care, but that will actually lend a little Rock Hall cred. You guys have been at it for a lot longer than some of those other 90s bands. But
yeah. We'll see what happens with that whole
we'll
thing.
see. I'm just speaking it into existence. But yeah, you mentioned Name, of course, blew up off of that fifth album, A Boy Named Goo in '95. Long Way Down was also a pretty big hit off of that. But tell me about Name. Memories of recording it. Like, which one of you guys wrote it? Just were you amazed to see it blow up like it did?
Yeah, John wrote Name and in his apartment in Buffalo, and we recorded the initial demo it in a teeny little room and in a studio that I actually still own in Buffalo.
Really?
Yeah, and we recorded it up in Toronto, um, outside of Toronto, in a place called Mississauga. You remember the band Triumph? It's like an old metal band from the '80s. We recorded in their studio up there in Canada, and with a producer, Lou Giordano, who had worked with Sugar and Bob Mould and the Smithereens and some bands like that. And we cut the tracks, and that song came out, and it was very, very different from what we were doing mostly. We had always done a little bit of that kind of thing, but that song was very, very different, and it got to be a hit, and it was on a lot of radio stations, a lot of different kinds of radio stations, not necessarily, rock stations, but all sorts of stations. Yeah. So we would come in when we would play events for like these light rock stations and such. And we'd come out and, we'd always play Name last, because it was the only song people knew. Yeah. So
make them wait for it, baby.
Yeah. So the first 40 minutes of the set were us pasting people against the back walls of the room because they didn't know what kind of band they were coming to see. The only song they knew was Name. So, so there was a bit of an identity crisis through that whole thing. But I think once people sort of knew that song and got to kind of figure out what the band was a little bit, when it came time for Iris to hit, it was a good bridge for us into having a real career.
Absolutely. And you perfect transition. You're a pro. You segued it for me because Iris is next, and you said a bridge, and that has an amazing bridge. Anyway, so that's off of Dizzy Up the Girl in '98. There's multiple hits on that. Let's try to go through them each quickly so we can, it doesn't have to be rapid fire answers, but we'll keep them quick. But Iris was so big. How big was it? Mostly, you think, because of the movie City of Angels, the soundtrack? Like, I know I'm a movie buff too, and that's sort of like a quasi remake of the Wim Wenders, that German movie, Wings of Desire, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, everyone here knows Meg Ryan and Nicolas Cage and City of Angels. But how big? Do you think the movie is what really propelled it, or is it what I said, the banana dance?
Well, we recorded that song. We went in and recorded it for the movie. John had played a demo of it for the music director, and just him playing acoustic and singing, and he liked it. Or actually, he went into his office and played it for him, and he liked it. So we went in with Rob Cavallo, the producer, who did a couple songs on Boy Named Goo too, and we went in and recorded that version with a guy named Alan Sides, an engineer named Alan Sides, who had done like a lot of the classic like Disney stuff and like string engineer.
Okay.
So we finished it, and I can remember John and I just looking at each other going, well, this is, we're like a door just firmly slammed behind us, with this song, like we felt it, it's like there was a shift in the band at that moment, and we turned it into the movie and they rejected it.
What?
They rejected it. And so John went in the studio and just recorded himself on acoustic guitar singing the song. So that's what's in the movie. It's
Oh,
him singing acoustic guitar. It's just him on acoustic guitar singing the song. But they
wait, but it's
agreed.
so it's still, and I don't want the world, but you don't hear the big percuss,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
epic
It's just
background.
exactly. It's just him
Wow.
singing it quietly and on an acoustic. But they agreed to let us put the thank God
Yeah.
they
The
agreed to
studio
let us put
version.
the
Yeah.
full version on the soundtrack, which kind of doesn't make sense because it wasn't in the movie, but
Right.
they let us do it anyway. And it came out on the soundtrack, and the soundtrack had Jesus, like U2 and Alanis Morissette and Sarah McLachlan and Peter Gabriel and
Yeah.
like I'm forgetting some of the big ones,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
were just so many big acts on this record. So we were just like, well, at least we'll have a song on it, and our names will be next to all these people.
Yeah.
But they put out a single. I can't remember what it was, the first single, and it didn't do very well. And they put out Iris, and then Iris was, at number one for like 26 weeks, man. Once it got up there, it's crazy, So,
So awesome.
and then, yeah, and then we were able to record the Dizzy record. And
Okay.
as we were as we were recording the Dizzy record, uh, I remember there was a television set on in the lounge at the studio that we were in Los Angeles, and the Stanley Cup Finals were happening. And I forget who was playing, but somebody just won, whoever just won. And they were carrying a guy around with holding the Stanley Cup on their shoulders, skating around the ice. And Iris was playing in the background.
Wow.
And yeah, and we were like, whoa. We were like,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah. Like,
Probably because it's
wow.
hot. It's hockey. It was probably because he was bleeding just to know he's alive.
Yeah.
I
so
love it.
so so we got to release Dizzy Up the Girl with a number one record on it already, like
Already, right out of
before
the
we even
gate.
put it out. Yeah,
Wow,
man.
that's awesome.
So it was really a great opportunity for us. Yeah.
That's cool. Well, speaking of ice skating, slide. Tell me, I mean, that song's instantly recognizable from that opening riff. But to me, of all your songs, like, yes, Iris is like the big one ever, iconic.
Mhm.
But and I have some other personal favorites, but Slide is the one that's almost like you would sit around with a guitar with a bunch of people around a campfire or like around a college campus, you know what I mean? Like I love when it kicks in, put your arms around me. Yeah, that. But yeah, I mean, tell me, I mean, do you agree? I mean, why is it so singable?
College campus. I heard someone call college campus music Birkin rock once. I thought
Birkenrock.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Like
Um,
Berkeley, I guess. Birkenrock. Yeah.
no, like Birkenstocks, I
Oh,
think.
Birkenstock. Okay, yeah. I like it.
Anyway,
That would be this song. But yeah, any memories of recording it?
yeah, 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 that song. We once again we had done some demos. Rob Cavallo at the time, we had been signed on after he did Iris. He had been signed on to do the entire Dizzy record. So he sort of like joined the group as a fourth member during that time. So he was actually playing guitar with us during that time. So when I hear that song, that's what I think of is sort of sitting around in the rehearsal room, like kind of playing with him on guitar. John will play acoustic, he would play electric. And now it's one of those songs that just come early in the set because like everybody knows that song. Like no matter what, everybody knows that song. Like you can play a few songs, there's a chance that there's people in the room that don't know them.
Right.
Even if they're kind of big songs, there's a
Right.
chance.
Right.
Slide, they're gonna know that song. So that's when like everything falls into place during
I
the
love it.
show.
Play that
Yeah,
early because they're gonna sing it
yeah,
back to you on
yeah.
stage.
Just
I love it.
falls
I
right
love
into
it.
place. It's nice.
Well, I'm gonna bring the mood down just a tad because Dizzy Up the Girl also had Black Balloon, and that is, I
Mm.
mean, it's tragic, but it's beautiful. I mean, about like a heroin addiction overdose. I mean, the black balloon around the arm, I guess. But the lines like "Angels Fall Without You There," or the one that really tearjerker is like "I'll go on as you get colder," like in the ground. I assume. I mean, man, just tell me about just how do you make something so tragic so beautiful?
Well, I mean, obviously John wrote that song, that's
Yeah.
I guess he's kind of more qualified to
Yeah.
answer that, but yeah, I mean, I think when you have subjects like that, and you're able to reach them in a beautiful way that that allows people to experience what you're saying and and still feel that warmth of a good song. Like I think it serves a double purpose, you know. Yeah, he knocked it out of the park with that one. That's for sure.
It's like it's heavy, but it's cathartic in a way.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
real quick, I have to ask you about Broadway, also off that album. You know, Broadway is dark tonight. Tell me, I find it interesting. I guess it sort of had its own meaning back then when you made it, but like I was able to even bring that song back and play it during the pandemic on our radio station. When all the theaters were closing, and I mean
Mm.
Broadway was really hit hard, but live events in general, as you know, as a musician, but Broadway especially. So yeah, I mean, just talk about what you were going for back then. The old man at the bar kind of stuff, but also
Yeah,
now, like waiting for his turn to die. Like you couldn't have never guessed it would take on a new
yeah.
meaning.
Well, Broadway's a neighborhood in Buffalo that John grew up in, and so that song's that neighborhood went very much like it became very impoverished, over the years. So that song's just sort of addressing kind of what happened in to those neighborhoods in Buffalo and to the people who were in those neighborhoods at the time. Yeah.
So not about the Broadway,
No,
but it's
no, no,
universal. It
no.
stands in for a lot of small towns around.
But that's the beautiful thing about music in general, is that you can write about things. I say this about our Chaos record a lot, the record we made during the pandemic. Like you write about things that happen to you, and things, people's journeys aren't always that much different. I mean, they certainly have different nuance, but there's only a few emotions, and
Yeah.
you apply those emotions to your scenarios. I think during the pandemic, I feel like everyone's lanes were very narrowed. Like when you talked about something, the stuff you were talking about were things that people were living, like most people were living through,
Yeah.
and it was such a rare time. I think it's going to be amazing 15 years, 20 years from now to look back at sort of what that did to our culture, because it seems like I don't think we've processed it yet, because those few years off were definitely pretty intense, man.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
And you've been generous with your time, so I know we got to let you run. And there's just so many more that we didn't even get to. But folks, come out to Merriweather. You'll hear Here Is Gone and
Yeah, man.
Let Love In and Better Days and the
Yeah.
great Supertramp cover. Give a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll hear all of them plus all the other records.
They'll be there. They'll be there, man.
Do you think? I guess these final seconds. Let's sort of end here. Then, like, you mentioned, being able to look back 20 years on sort of how you highlighted some of these tragic moments. But do you also think some songs like, Let Love In or Better Days, I mean, this sort of came out of in the years after 9/11 and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
tragic. But like, I don't know. Do you think your music you have some uplifting stuff of hope
Well,
for light at the end of the tunnel,
I think it's all uplifting, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
Like, not necessarily in the same way all the time, but I think the idea, even when you speak about things, you mentioned, things being cathartic before, like that's an uplifting concept in general,
Yeah. Yeah.
to be able to let off some of that steam, like, let go of some of that emotion. Like that's good stuff, man. And yeah, I mean, and I think, like, quite honestly, like with the song like Slide, it's like, Slide's a poppy little, it's a little toe tapper, but like, listen to the words, and he's touching on some pretty heavy stuff in that song,
Yeah.
um, yeah, and so, I think there's room for all that, and if you're a band that's, trying to do a wide variety of things, then you're going to visit all those neighborhoods, I think.
I agree entirely. And if you can't tell by my, rock hall earlier, the esteem that I hold you all in. I mean, I think Goo Goo Dolls is right up there. Come on, guys. You just inducted the Foos. Now I put in the Goos. Let's go. A little
Hey,
Foo
come on,
Goo.
man. Hey, there you go. There's the plan. that should be our campaign, you know?
The Fugu campaign. Hey, thank you so much, Robbie. I really, really appreciate it.
All right,
Again, Goo
brother.
Goo Dolls coming to Meriwether Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland, August 4th. Get your tickets. Hey,
All
thanks,
right, brother. Thanks so much. See you later.
Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Our theme music is Scott Buckley's Clarion. Remember to give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time.